And let me share with you what I think is the primary reason that influences this curve. I have my explanation as to why the curve of happiness looks like this. The reason the capitalist society is paying you is not for you to fulfill your dreams and hopes and to pursue your passions. And that any research out there is just gaslighting me. The shape of these happiness curves can be explained. You know, once upon a time, I was interested in the science of happiness. It's actually a research field called positive psychology. There's a lot of research trying to understand why are people happy. Is that something that's genetically influenced, or can we actually do actions and things to influence happiness, and blah blah blah. There's a whole set of research about this. And one of the most famous results of positive psychology research is this graph right here. The happiness or the shape of happiness over people's lifetimes. Um, and what these two folks have done, Blanchard and Oswald, is that they went and looked around multiple countries, I believe. I think when they say here 7 major surveys, I think that this is research was done across different countries, rich countries, not so rich countries. And they've surveyed a lot of people. And what they found is that across pretty much every nation in the world, or at least in the sample that they've surveyed, is that happiness follows this U-shaped curve. Now, if you ask me what is happiness, well, happiness has a very specific definition in positive psychology. They call it subjective well-being, and subjective well-being is measured. There's a scale that positive psychologists have. One of the leading positive psychologists back in the 70s, I believe, designed a scale called the subjective well-being scale. It's a survey. It asks you a bunch of questions, and basically the score of that survey basically gives a certain level of what's called happiness. So it's important to know that that happiness here is defined in a very very specific way, and it is not life evaluation. So a common misconception in positive psychology research or people who are new is that they think that happiness is a question of how do I evaluate my life. Oh, I'm successful, I have houses. No, that is not considered happiness. That is not a, or rather, that is not a measure of happiness. That is a measure of life evaluation. Um, so they went around the world, asked many questions, asked many people questions about their happiness. And then they've constructed these curves. And what they found is the shape of these curves is basically U-shaped. You are like probably super happy in like your teen years or in your high school, potentially here in college. So before 22, 23, and that just starts to drop in until you hit the bottom, which is like, your 50s, which is probably like sometime around your midlife, and maybe that's why people, so this whole thing of midlife crisis, between 43 and 55, you really kind of are at the bottom of your happiness levels. And then after that, it starts picking up again. And you see that by the time you're in your 70s and 80s, you see this um, basically increase in happiness levels. Interestingly, there is a higher variation between these different surveys or these different population samples here in the 70s and 80s than here. There may be some explanations here that health differences across these populations are explaining these differences. So maybe this is a wealthier maybe country and they have better healthcare, and so their overall level of happiness is higher than maybe a lesser wealthy countries. But overall, the pattern though is there. So you're happy in your teenage years and early life, like maybe like early 20s, and then it starts dropping. The bottom is like your midlife, around 40, 50, and then it peaks again. Now, when I look at this graph, I have my explanation as to why the curve of happiness looks like this. I have that explanation. And to me, it is so obvious why this happiness curve looks like this. And let me share with you what I think is the primary reason that influences this curve. And I've said this to many people before, and I'll say it to you today. The shape of these happiness curves can be explained by the days and the moments that you're entering the job market and you're exiting it. Sometime here, you know, usually early, if if you go to the trades, maybe you start working earlier if you're in university, but sometime 21, 22, you enter the job market. Okay? It is your first job. And let me tell you, and anybody who's been through this knows that that first job is a fucking knock in the face. It knocks you down. You know that first job experience, and I'm gonna do a video just talking about what it's like to transition from university to the first job. Man, that is a shock to the system, and nobody prepares you, particularly when in graduation somebody is telling you, hey, you can change the world because you're the future of humanity. No, you will be slapped in the face. You are at the bottom of the pyramid, and nobody gives a shit about you. All the shit trickles down, and because you're at the bottom, you get all the shit. But that's a conversation for a different time. Now, you enter the job market. All of the dreams that you had back in university, all the hopes, the visions, all of those great principles and stories you've told yourself, you're like, holy fuck, what the fuck is this? That is what you're thinking right here. And that's why you see these extreme drops. No, I'm telling you, that's why you see these extreme. You're like, holy, oh my god! You're like, you go there and like, oh my god, is this what my life is gonna look like for the next 30 years or 40 years? You know what? That explains these extreme drops in the beginning. It's like, holy fuck, oh my god, oh what am I doing here? All the memes you've seen. You know, yeah. What is this? So you enter the job market right here and you're like, fuck, they did not tell me this. Nobody in my whole life, in primary school, middle school, high school, college, has prepared me for this. No one, no one. It was all a lie. It was all a lie. The professors lied, the teachers lied, the counselors lied, the speakers lied, everybody lied. Everybody lied. Everybody told you stories that were not really true. And so that first drop is there. And then maybe like, after 2, 3 years of work, you kind of get into some sort of baseline level of, suckiness. So you do your first job. And so you kind of start seeing the drop is not bad, but like, you're kind of chugging around. You get to your 30s, and in your 30s, a lot of things happen. When you're 30, you're not 20 anymore, okay? You are thinking about retirement, or potentially you're thinking about getting into a relationship, marriage, potentially kids. Things change, you know? And if you're like the majority of people in this world who have some sort of hopes for some sort of financial stability, you might be thinking of buying a house, okay? You might be thinking of buying a house. A lot of first home purchase decisions happen somewhere here, somewhere here. And so, um, you make that commitment, okay? You might get in a relationship, you have kids, and all that, and then you may be purchasing a house. And so that's kind of where you realize, you hit your 30s and all the dreams, they're dead. They're long gone. The dreams of changing the world and curing cancer, like it's all gone. Like all you're really like, you see your salary, you see your salary from that first job, and for 2, 3 years, those salary increases are not that great. Okay. And then you need to change jobs to get a better increase, because the only way you can improve your salary is by basically changing jobs. Like if you really want to get a respectable increase in salary, you need to jump jobs. That this is the nature of the business today. Loyalty does not reward anybody. Keep that in mind. And so you change jobs, okay, maybe once, maybe twice. You're accumulating some work experience. You're now a bit, you've, kind of know how to navigate that. Like, the work is not what it was all promised to be. The people are paying you for a fucking reason. Like the reason the capitalist society is paying you is not for you to fulfill your dreams and hopes and to pursue your passions. That is not the reason why capitalists pay you. Okay, you need to realize that capitalists love their money. Okay, and capitalist is a concept. The capitalist society. Okay, the capitalists, they love their money. Okay, they are not willing to give it to you so that you can find your purpose in life, pursue your dreams and your passions. That is not why you're being paid. You need to realize that. And anybody who tells you otherwise is a liar. Okay? They're lying to you or they're gaslighting you. It is important to realize that anybody who tells you a company hires you and pays you so that you can find your purpose, pursue your dreams, is basically gaslighting you. That is what you're experiencing here. Okay? The reason you're going through this process is you're like, oh my God, what is happening? This is not what it should be. You're not feeling great. You're like, what the fuck is, I'm not doing the things that I studied and I'm getting very little, like, it's just, I'm not fulfilled. I'm not blah, blah, blah. It's like a long list of things. And like, but it shouldn't be like, I shouldn't feel this way. No, right? Like, I shouldn't. And you talk to your friends and everybody feeling the same shit. And you're like, what has happened? Like, but everybody's successful. You know, Steve Jobs back in 2007 said, oh, you know, find your passion. You'll never work a day in your life. What am I like? Is you know? No, they're just gaslighting you. Work sucks to a very large extent. Okay, parts of it at least, like a huge component, like 60-70% of what you're gonna do as a professional over a career is gonna suck. You know, it really only when you get here, after many years of experience and building up professional capital and financial capital, that maybe then that ratio changes where you do 80% of things you do might be like really truly fulfilling to you and 20% are like admin shit that you need to do. But anyway, back to what we were talking about right here. 30, you go and you basically decide to purchase a house and you're like, fuck man, I need to get a loan, you know? And this is where it really kind of really starts like, you know, you're close to the bottom there, you know, like you get a loan, you're like, fuck man. So I for sure can purchase a house, you know, just outright in cash. I don't have that kind of cash. I don't have $1 million um sitting on the side, you know, to go purchase a house. Okay, like nobody does. Okay, very few people are fortunate enough to be in that position. And so you're like, so I need to get a loan. Okay. Now this is of course in the situations where you're able to have enough money for a down payment and make enough to be able to be eligible for a loan that helps you finance a house at the current market price. Okay, that a lot of people can't do that today in many countries. But here's what happens when you are about to embark in that decision, that very consequential decisions you need to realize. Something really interesting happens, and this is what you see here play around. It's like you're like, fuck, man. So I probably don't enjoy the career that I'm doing. I mean, I've normalized it, but I don't really enjoy it. So any hopes that I had of like changing careers and going to do the things that I would like to do, you know, when you realize how much houses cost and how much rent costs, you do first of all realize that six-figure salaries are not a lot. That is what you need today in Western societies, at least in North American societies today. If you want to have an alright life, an okay life, you need a six-figure salary. If you're alone or if you're a household, you need it combined, you need a six-figure salary. There is it like listen, the mathematics of home ownership, of paying rent in these big cities does not work if you're not making six-figure salaries. Do not let anybody lie to you again and gaslight you and make you think that $100,000 or $120,000 is a lot of money. It is not. Okay? It is not. In fact, today, if you are a single person making that kind of salary, you probably cannot buy a house, even a simple studio, in the majority of major cities in North America. You could not do it alone. No bank would actually be willing to give you a loan if you're a single person to be able to finance a house at the current market rate. Because they'll say like, listen, yeah, sure, you make 120,000, but you could lose your fucking job. Okay? You could lose your job. And typically places that pay that kind of salary, they'd be like, oh, shep, we have a mass layoff. So, these two realizations that houses and cost life in general is expensive. Okay? And then that's on one side. That really to do anything you need a lot of money. And then that a lot of things, a lot of jobs and career prospects that pay money, that pay those kind of six-figure salaries, they're not really great. They're stressful jobs, okay? They're stressful. Like if a job pays you six-figure salary, it is stressful. Okay? You are paying with your mental health, okay? So you're probably working relatively long hours. Like it may not be physically demanding, but it's mentally taxing. Okay, so you forget this idea of, oh, I would like to go back to school and study to become a psychologist. No, it will take you 5 years to retrain into a psychologist, and by that time, you realize that psychologists make maybe $60,000. So you'll be 35, 36, 37 if you decide to make that career pivot or transition, making $60,000. Okay, that's not it's not mucho. So you make the decision to buy a house. You kind of lock in, and that is really where kind of shit just kind of hits the bottom, because now you're like, oh my god, I am gonna stay in a job that I dislike for a long fucking period of time. Like I can't even quit or like make that pivot when I'm 40, because now I have a fucking 30 or 25 years mortgage, and maybe you even have kids. You're like, oh, I don't want kids, or my partner wants kids, and then you have kids. I'm like, oh my god, I have kids. Oh shit, we can't return these kids. There is no return policy that comes with kids, and those are these years. You got kids, you have a mortgage. You're like, you've barely paid 5 or 10 years of that mortgage, and you look up like, oh my god, I got 15 years of this to deal with. Like I have 15 fucking years of this shit to deal with. And you're probably now a manager, and managers, particularly frontline managers or middle managers, they get shit ton of crap. That is not a nice job. The pay is maybe like, 10-15% more than an individual contributor. Man, because the majority of people can't be VPs, and directors making, like a lot, way more money. It's just going to be a frontline manager or a middle manager. And so a manager of managers. So the difference in pay is not, maybe you're like 30% or 40% or maybe 50% more. And then your IC just changes jobs, goes somewhere else. And he's basically, he has the same salary. But you're like, being a middle or frontline manager sucks. So you're like, you got the trio, the deadly triangle of Bermuda. You have a house, you have kids, and you're a middle manager in corporate America or corporate Canada, whatever. And that's here. And you're probably overweight and your health is shit. Sorry. Yeah. That's what you're seeing play out here. Things really start to change. By the time you start to get to 55, you're like, wait a second here. I've got only 5 years on this mortgage. Yeah. And you're like, wait a second. Maybe in 10 years I'm retired. Maybe even in 6 or 7 years. Holy fuck, these ETFs went up way more than I expected. I could be retired by 60. Wait, I'll be paid. Wait, my house, somehow this house is now worth $5 million. Oh my god. Wait, we could sell this thing and downsize, and we've unlocked, $4 million. I'm talking about the future, because today houses, old people are sitting on houses worth $1 million or $2, So I assume when you are at that age, you're like, or some of these people, so many people, they're old. Like, wait, my house is worth $1.5 million, $2 million, $2 million, and I can sell it and pay no taxes. Yes, in Canada, you can sell your house and you pay absolutely no taxes on the capital gain you made. Nothing. It's all yours. So you're like, what? Wait, I could sell this for $2 million? What am I doing? And then you that's what happens here. 55. People realize they've only have 5 years on their mortgages to pay. They maybe have 10 years to work. So it's like, oh my god, and they at this part they just stop caring. Especially, they're like, fuck this shit. I've spent a lifetime worrying about this crap. I don't want to do it anymore. So they care less about their work. Okay? And they start to see that a future of financial freedom is possible, and that they may, in fact, have to leave this whole thing that they call professional world. And so that's when they start getting excited. Now, of course, naturally at 60, look at what happens at 65. All of these happiness things just they skyrocket. Like they just go back to what happens at 60? People retire. What is so obvious? Why isn't it so obvious that these curves are clearly their shape is clearly explained? Entering the job market, you're in the middle of the job market. Entering the job market, you're in the middle of your professional career. I'm like, oh my god, I've got like another 15 years of this to deal with. So you're like, fuck this shit. How am I gonna do it? And then by 65, you leave the job market, you retire. I'm like, fuck yeah, baby. Woohoo, cruises. Yeah, hikes. Yeah, And these curves just go up and up and up and up. You don't have to deal with meetings and Zoom calls and writing emails and aligning with stakeholders and all. Like you don't have to deal with none of that stuff, you know? So naturally, as soon as you exit the job market, as soon as these samples of people exit the job market, guess what, at 65 and take their retirement, they're like, man. And of course, kids leave, so you don't have to take care of these like dumbos, like, you maybe paid for their college or like, god damn, you're like, get out of my house, just go and do your thing. Yes, please go. Yeah, you want to travel the world, go. You figured it out. Just get the hell out of here. And these curves just go up and up and up. That is, ladies and gentlemen, my explanation, my very, very humble explanation of why these happiness curves look like this. Okay? And it's a simple explanation. Okay? I don't need Blanche Flower and Oswald to explain to me in details and do a bunch of regression analysis with a bunch of factors to explain to me why these things are U-shaped instead of being like, I don't know, V-shaped or flat shaped or no. I have my explanation, and no amount of research papers will convince me otherwise. I am convinced. Yes, you could call this dogma. Yes, you can call this whatever you want. I am convinced that my explanation is the explanation. Okay, and that any research out there is just gaslighting me into believing other things. But yeah, these curves can all be explained by entering the professional world, being in the middle of your career, and then exiting the professional world. So, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here with me and listening to my rant. See you in the next one.